because I can't hear that. So, a bit of an election landslide in the United Kingdom this morning. The Labour Party has taken a major election victory led by Keir Starmer. They seem to be sitting on 406 seats. They've taken this morning. The Conservative Party crossing 100 seats. So it turns out the exit polls in the UK election turned out to be quite accurate. Joining us now to decode this election result, what it means for India, what the reasons for Rishi Sunak's defeat in the elections were, is former Indian High Commissioner to the United Kingdom, Sinha. Ambassador Sinha, thank you so much for joining us. Could you tell us what your first impressions are of this election defeat for the Conservative Party and for Labour's victory?
I think it's a stunning defeat for the Tories, for the Conservative Party. The results were expected in the sense that it was quite clear that the Tories are going to lose and lose badly. But I think the results are still coming in. But if the Labour Party crosses 400 seats in the House of Commons has 650 seats, it will be truly historic. I mean, after many, many years, with such a clear mandate being given to the people. Of course, there are many reasons for why this happened, but I think what is important to note is that we have a very clear mandate given by the people of the United Kingdom to the Labour Party. And I think there was also growing dissatisfaction of performance by the Tories over the last 14 years. Don't forget that there were 5 prime ministers, like a revolving door, 5 prime ministers, and there were some policies that obviously were not properly implemented. And of course, Brexit and the pandemic added to the mix. And I think the Tories have paid dearly for not only missed opportunities, but perhaps bad implementation of policies.
I understand. And Rishi Sunak himself, the Prime Minister, the first British Asian Prime Minister, someone who garnered a lot of interest in India. How do you see his personal role in this election? Of course, some people mentioned that he perhaps should not have called the election this early. Others say that, you know, a lot of the crises that he was saddled with were not of his making. But how do you see Rishi Sunak's personal role in this election defeat?
Well, you know, as far as the timing of the election goes, I mean, Mr. Sunak did call the elections early, but don't forget that by December, in any case, he would have had to hold the elections. And whether things would have improved between now and December at the latest, I don't really know. But the fact of the matter is that Mr. Sunak is in many ways the fall guy for the Tories because he inherited such a mess. Don't forget that his predecessor, who lasted all of 49 days, came up with these disastrous tax cuts, which really impacted the economy. And before her, you had a prime minister, very charismatic, but during COVID, he was plagued with all sorts of scandals, and it created problems for the Tories, really. So I think Mr. Sunak himself, of course, he has to take share, apportion some blame, in the sense that some blame would come to him because he was, after all, the leader of the Tories for almost 2 years. But I think a lot of the mess that he inherited, he did try and stabilize the economy, and he did succeed to some extent. Inflation was brought down and there was growth in GDP. But I think it was not enough because the disastrous policies followed earlier. And I think the public, the voting public in the UK voted very clearly for change for the Labour Party.
Right. If I can ask you a question about India and India's perspective on the elections, you were High Commissioner to the United Kingdom from 2016 to 2018 when, of course, the Conservative government was in power. However, the Conservatives approached India, of course, Rishi Sunak coming in as Prime Minister was seen as, you know, sort of a shot in the arm for bilateral ties, this idea that, you know, as an Indian origin Prime Minister, he would prioritize relations with India. How do you think the Conservatives over the last 14 years have worked on ties with India? Have they been good partners in government?
I would say so, definitely. And starting with David Cameron, I think he made a very conscious effort to reach out to India. Of course, India's growth story, India's economy was doing very well, and India obviously had emerged as an important power on the global stage. And the UK realized that, and I think the Tories, to credit to them, they did try and build on that relationship. David Cameron, if I remember correctly, visited India thrice as Prime Minister and six times otherwise. Of course, that was carried forward by, to some extent, by Theresa May, though I must say that her visa policies, immigration policies were not too much to our liking. But she did visit India and she did keep up the momentum. And of course, Boris Johnson really went out of his way, both as Foreign Secretary to Theresa May and also as Prime Minister. He sort of set up a roadmap along with Prime Minister Modi for bilateral relations. If you recall that famous quip that we'll have the FTA by Diwali, of course, it hasn't happened, but certainly there was political will as far as the Tories were concerned. And as far as, and I skipped Liz Truss because she was there for a very short while, though she, as business secretary and as foreign secretary, she did, as business secretary, she did try, and of course, as foreign secretary also, she did come to India. But Rishi Sunak, I think, was for us, it was important that a person of Indian origin had become the Prime Minister of the UK. And Mr. Sunak was obviously invested in that relation, this bilateral relationship. Of course, he was beset with so many problems that I'm afraid we couldn't progress too much, especially on the FTA. While we've had 13 or 14 rounds of negotiations, we've still not been able to conclude an FTA. And I do hope that with the new government, we will be able to do so.
Understood. And speaking of the new government, the Labour Party, lots of conversation this morning about what their policy will be on India. There's a lot of conversation about how in 2019 or going even further back, there were questions about whether Labour's stance on sensitive issues to India, like Kashmir. Several of their members of parliament came out against India's decision to abrogate Article 317 Kashmir, and that sort of solidified this image of Labour as somehow being India skeptical or having differences with India. But in recent weeks and months, we've seen Labour try to project that they want a much closer relationship with India, that they will deliver on things like the FTA. Could I ask you to sort of talk about how you've seen Labour's policy on India evolve over the last couple of years?
I think it's important to keep that, and when you're answering this question, you're responding to this question, I must keep it in historical context. If you recall, in the time of our independence, Clement Attlee, who was the Labour Prime Minister, was considered to be pro-India, and the situation with the Labour Party evolved, and we had Winston Churchill as the Tory leader, who I would not say was pro-India. But I think what happened over the years, we've had the Labour leadership, the Labour Party policies towards the subcontinent evolving, depending on constituency pressure. And I recall when Her Majesty the late Queen Elizabeth visited here in I think it was 96 or 97, Robin Cook, the Foreign Secretary, had made some gratuitous remarks on Kashmir, which really cleared the pitch. And if you recall, the then Prime Minister Gujral responding to that. So I think the Labour Party policy has evolved. You've had David Miliband, who was Foreign Secretary, then Ed Miliband, his brother, leader of the party, and of course Jeremy Corbyn. I think as far as India is concerned, during Jeremy Corbyn's leadership of the Labour Party, things weren't good. You mentioned 2019. There was a resolution at the Labour Party conference in September, which was obviously perceived very badly here in India. And I think we should understand the context, because at that time, there were a coterie of members of parliament representing the Midlands and Northern England, Bradford, etc., who were of a particular persuasion of Mirpuri descent or Pakistani origin, who were able to shape policy, if not shape policy, certainly influence Labour policy towards India at that point of time. But I think Sir Keir Starmer has moved the party to the center. They have made overtures to India. And of course, the Indian diaspora has become an extremely important swing factor. So both parties have been cultivating the diaspora. But as far as, if you recall, the Shadow Foreign Secretary David Lammy has made some very positive statements on relations with India, on keeping up the Indo-Pacific policy, the free an open Indo-Pacific, and of course, commitment to concluding a mutually beneficial FTA. So these are positive signs that have come from the Labour leadership. Of course, the price of the pudding is in its eating. We will have to wait and see how this government shapes up and how they deal with India, particularly on sensitive issues, because you're aware that there are issues there not only regarding Kashmir, but also extremist Khalistanis who pose a problem and clear and imminent danger as far as the safety and security of the High Commission and Indian diplomats are concerned, but also in their pronouncements against India, basically on occasions even calling for violent action. So I think we need to be very mindful of that. But I'm sanguine that a new Labour government under Sir Keir Starmer would look at India as a valuable partner and work together, sort of highlighting our complementarities, and on the global stage as an important partner of United Kingdom.
Ambassador, if I may also ask you, in terms of moving forward, the top priorities for the new Labour government and the Indian government here, which is also, of course, a new government. What do you think the top priorities will be in terms of delivery on the India-UK agenda?
I think the Labour government would have to first focus on internal domestic issues, the economy, the National Health Service. There are 7.5 million people on the waiting list. There are 2.5 million people on surviving on food bank. So I think these are issues that will preoccupy them initially. However, I'm sure as far as India is concerned, they would, if not continue, build upon the policies and the initiatives taken by the Tory government and come up with some of their own initiatives, I'm sure. So I think we need to work as true partners. And I think that will only happen if both sides are committed to this relationship. We certainly are. And I'm sure from the statements made by the Labour leadership that they are too. So I think our priority would be, of course, FTA, the FTA, and subsumed within the FTA would be issues relating to visas and immigration, because don't forget that the Tories had promised to bring down net immigration, especially after net migration, especially after Brexit, but they failed to do so. Even the Rwanda policy didn't really take off because of legal hurdles. So, and the Labour, of course, is committed to scrapping the Rwanda policy, but they will have to grapple with this issue of migration, because that obviously is an important issue as far apart from the economy that the British people perceive. And I think the vote for Labour is clearly a mandate for them to try and address these important issues.
Understood, sir. Ambassador, thank you so much for your time, for talking to us about the implications of this election for India's foreign policy. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you so much for watching India Today Global.
Thank you very much.